So, greetings for everyone. One of the comrades that shared, shared his words with us. I'd like to greet everyone who spoke, and also this initiative that helps us share these ideas to have even more reasons to continue active in this combat. So, special greetings to our comrade ambassador of the China Republic in Venezuela. He is always very brave in his words. And thank you also for his revolutionary friendship. Same for our comrade Alicia Castro, who always coherent and always acts according to her thoughts. And of course, the landless movement as well. I want to say also that our comrades from Brazil had to very bravely take on a candidacy in the case of their elections when the empire decided to imprison a presidential candidate simply to get him out of the way of the election process. Now, this is a very important issue, this comment I just made, because in the question here that brought us to this debate, there's an issue that might go unnoticed. In the world system, this multilateralism, the idea of an integrity between among the different nations, this has been sequestered by the US. The right that we have at the international level, all of the peoples, to express ourselves and to have self-determination, this has been sequestered by the US. When we say, for example, a new Cold War, and we position it communicationally as a Cold War between the US and China, that itself is an ideological trap. The US pretends to use all of their cultural constructions to, again, oppose to others, and on the basis of this, build an imperial policy. There's no Cold War between China and the US. China is exerting their sovereign rights to develop. There's not a confrontation here between two. It's the US imperialism against multilateralism. So it's imperialism confronting the right of self-determination of all the peoples. So if we fall in the trap of making this individual as if it were an antithesis between two countries, this, again, is an ideological trap that they want to catch us in. And when we see the entirety of the cultural construction built in this situation with the Soviet Union, we see all of the cliches, the accusations of socialists, the accusations of humanists, the accusations against popular movements, as if that were, in a way, the denial of the struggles of humanity. And I wanted to briefly mention a few of the issues related here specifically to China, and if I may also share a few more thoughts with you on certain general aspects. In the first place, how surprising it is when we can read certain aspects, specifically China's posture and positioning when it comes to the planet and international issues. For example, the premises stated very openly, as Alicia Castro shared with us. The White Book, we talk about the statements of the Chinese president in each international arena. So what are the aspects that can be used as to position them as one side on a war? They mention friendship, they mention sincerity, mutual benefit, inclusion, cooperation under the principle of win-win. These are principles precisely describing China's foreign policy. And a few years ago, but also growing, they mentioned this community of a common destiny for humanity. And if I may extend myself beyond the minutes that I had, Ambassador, I wanted to share this quote of Chinese academics when they talk about the revision of the Chinese foreign policy. And it says they managed to defend peace because we established a system of everything that was under the sky that integrates all of the nations in a world built for, from, and for everyone. These are the philosophy. This is the philosophy that's underneath all of their construction. And in the case of Venezuela, we have a very deep, very close relationship with China. There's an affinity here. And as you know, we have a fundamental reading. Aside from our constitution, our constitution is the plan for the homeland. And here, one of the statements, we have an entire chapter in 5 different historical goals. And one of them is precisely geopolitics of peace, where we mention, for example, the relation with China, the relation with the countries of our America, and the goals that we want to strive for. So the community of all of the nations in the world. As I said at the very beginning, we are right now in a moment of sequestering, of multilateralism at the world level. This is how we need to see this, as a crusade of state, government, and the people. When we see there is a rejection of the people's will, and that certain international organism allows itself to be used against the will of the people, this alliances that want to be built against the self-determination of the people. For example, what happened in Bolivia with the elections of Evo Morales? What has happened in Venezuela with each one of the elections called in our country? More than 1.4 elections in our country in the last 20 years, and less than 15 elections of everything that relates to the Fourth Republic.
What does this mean when they practice a certain censorship internationally? Or they try to use through companies to hold hostage the freedom of information that everyone should have. And this is very serious. And this is related to the looting of each of our countries and using the multilateral system as a victim of the war they have been trying to wage against our countries. I would like to try to contextualize this and illustrate this as a general thesis. The sanctions that have selfishly been imposed, we saw it under Trump, but it's really part of the essence of this model. The sanctions that they have imposed on companies in China, in this case, is a legitimate sovereign decision to try to hold back the development of a country simply because the other was incompetent in achieving this level of technological development. Is that the free market that they are trying to establish under their great theory of international affairs? In other words, if they are saying that you're developing too much, I'm going to hold you back. If you're developing too much, I'm going to speculate on you. If you are posing competition for my companies and not for my private companies, then I'm going to sanction you. And from this, they try to establish a competitive edge for their own companies. This is one of the most serious tactics that we've seen, in which they try to hold hostage national power for the benefit of private corporations. So when we look at this, we can say, well, this might occur in the case of China, but we also see it's occurring in the case of Russia, and it's also occurring in the case of Iran. And this has occurred very seriously with countries such as Libya. Then who answers for the billions of dollars stolen from the people of Libya? And how can we see that they had international forces coming to invade a country and then whitewashing this level of aggression and thievery in the eyes of the rest of the world? What is the justification for this also assault on Venezuela? It's part of this same thesis. It is not a Cold War, I would say. It is the vision of imperialism against the right to self-determination of peoples. It is an attempt to hold the international organizations hostage. For example, some people grab and finance this supposedly under the thesis of we're talking about regional imbalance in the case of countries. And they try to use regional imbalance, such as they've done with China, to have an impact on these regions. And they do this for China using their own neighbors in order to try to undermine this. And what happens with other countries? Let's look at Venezuela. Let's see exactly what is happening with Venezuela. Legitimate claim in the case of Esquivel. They're trying to use the issue of regional balance. What happens with international organizations when they falsify or allow themselves to falsify figures about some countries in terms of the level of migration? They receive a bunch of money, and then you don't know what happens to that money, and then some international organizations follow their hegemonic line. And so these are some of the things that we have seen come about. If I may, I would just like to refer to a few of these things and illustrate and show how this is international aggression that is taking place against countries. When we talk about holding hostage the people's right to self-determination, I would like to share a phrase with you so that you can see how this Cold War takes place. A gentleman whom you certainly will recognize, a very humanist, Elliot Abrams, said that all who oppose the United States vision have to go through the most painful deprivations, terrible insecurity, and feel the gravest need. This is what he said before the US Congress. And what did they try to do with Venezuela? Well, for example, they tried to reduce all of the country's revenue of more than $50 billion, went to more than $700 million a year. This aggression is also a matter of holding hostage internationally more than $5 billion in your country, generating more than $102 billion in losses in the oil industry, more than $116 billion in terms of the country's domestic production. And through this, to try to generate, as he said, the most painful deprivations, the most serious acts of aggression. And we have other billions of dollars as over the last year. The government has had to increase direct transfers to our population. And without any revenue coming in, without special revenue, and without international finance, to have direct transfers of money to the population for food, medicine, health, education, for more than $300 billion as direct transfers to our people under the principle that no one is going to be abandoned by the system of social protection. Nobody is going to bring our population to the knees just because the U.S. empire wants to do so. And of course, within this battle, in the case of COVID-19, figures showed by Venezuela and countries such as Cuba, countries suffering blockades, show how part of the debate is really they have emerged victorious. And we see this is the model of international solidarity and support for the people. In the area of international solidarity, China has proven itself to be part of the brave ones that have this humanitarian approach, and it is a humanitarian power, and they are assisting the development of our countries. This is a war against who? The war that they propose to the world, it's not a war against a country, it's a war against sovereignty. It is a war against self-determination. It is a war against this concept of public good as a fundamental human right that humans and people have that should be met, and they are not merchandise. For example, when you talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, and they try to privatize this, this is a human need that they are simply trying to profit off of. But also the vision that we have had vis-a-vis the aggression against China, Russia, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela, and all of our countries is very much in line with Comandante Chavez, who talked about an entire vision for our country and UNASUR and the ALBA countries and the vision of the struggle of peoples to create a multipolar world. For example, the issue of thinking about the true blue helmets to place order, this unlike what the US empires tried to do, and a global system that's been held hostage to them, to have a comprehensive view for logistics, for trade, for finance, and for the Bank of the South. As Comandante Chavez said, and I'm sure that all of you will remember this, how his vision was distorted. He talked about the Bank of the South as a response to counteract the economic warfare against countries, a vision of international cooperation. We greet this space, but we also want to take the opportunity to say we need to use every trench available to us to denounce US imperialism and what it is doing. The struggles of our people are not simply against a country. We're talking about one of the most serious moments in human history. We cannot allow multilateralism and Commander Chavez's view of human geopolitics. We have to understand that humanity has a shared destiny, and President Maduro finds this as a meeting point with the government of China. And what we are engaged in is a struggle in which nation states and the peoples are resisting the serious aggression being waged by US empire. We have to make sure that the nation states are resisting this aggression against each of our countries. I don't want to take more of your time, but thank you very much, brothers and sisters.